This is the definitive review of this, the Traktor Kontrol S2 Mk3, the most important tractor DJ controller for many, many years. We go to exhaustive detail on practically all the functions of this, from the motorized jog wheels to the screens to the inputs and outputs, the pads, the mixer and everything else in this review. If there's anything at the end of the review that you're still not quite clear on or that we didn't cover to your satisfaction, please do ask questions underneath. Give us your feedback as well. We'll be here to help you with all that stuff. Now, if you find this useful, please do share it. Hit that share button here and put it on your favorite network and let your friends know about it. And if you like this video and want more like it, please hit the subscribe button and then hit the bell, which will allow us to notify you when we make more stuff. Right, should we plug it in and get going? So if you're used to the Traktor Kontrol S2 Mk3, the look and feel here is similar, but it's one of those situations where, although it looks similar at first glance, pretty much everything has changed when you dig a bit closer. The decks are no longer a mirror image of each other. They are now as if they were separates that had been pushed together, which is very much the way things have gone. The play and pause buttons are now where they're normally put on DJ controllers and DJ hardware in 2018, one above the other. They're nice and simple to use with a big click, and they are large down here, no little rubber buttons to press. The top of the controller still has the effects, however, the mixer's been squashed in a little bit in order to allow these awesome big jog wheels to fit onto the unit, so the gap between channels C and A and B and D has gone. Overall, it doesn't look cluttered. It looks more streamlined than the original S2 Mk2 and Mk1, which is very similar, which is really cool because when you dig deep, there's an awful lot of new stuff going on here. So let's have a proper look at some of the features as I talk you around everything on the controller. Now, of course, the first thing you're going to want to see is these motorized platters, and they're really nice. Because it's only a 5-inch jog wheel, and because it's in quite a lightweight controller, and because it doesn't have the control vinyl and the slip mat on top, which are added to most platters of this type to give the feeling of vinyl, you might think that it would just be a little bit strange, but actually it makes a lot of sense. It feels really nice. It's got just the right amount of bite and give, and you'll be instantly at home on this platter if you're used to using vinyl. So a big thumbs up for us for these. They're also really quiet. They feel kind of magnetic. There's something about them that feels like a bit of alchemy going on. Of course it isn't, it's just a motor in there doing the job, but that's the feeling you get from them. So another thing about these is that if you hold down the jog button and turn the platter, it will make it tighter. So in the jog mode, where the platter isn't spinning around, where it continues to play, and the LED shows you that, nonetheless, that's now nice and tight. And of course you've got the nudge at the edge. But if you want it looser, you can hold down jog and spin it like this, and now that's a lot looser than it was before, and you can go all the way through from very, very loose to very tight, and indeed you can do that in the preferences as well, but that's an easy way of doing it without having to go into the preferences. So another thing about the jogs is the haptic drive. Now the haptic drive is where when you set cue points and loops, as you move around, you will hit the loop and you can feel it as a small nudge, or a bit like when you press the button on your phone and get a bit of haptic kickback. Now it's something that has got mixed opinion out there. We think it's quite nice. We think it might be distracting for scratch DJs, for instance, but it's certainly good to have. You don't have to use that if you don't want it, but it's an interesting addition, and Native Instruments says they're going to be playing with that and trying to find more uses for it based upon feedback from the community. So watch this space on haptic drive. Certainly a nice thing to have built in there. So while we're on the decks, let's talk about the flux mode and the reverse mode up here on the transport controls. So flux mode means that whatever you do down here, the track will continue playing underneath as if you hadn't done anything. So it's good for kind of like scratching and messing around like this. So you can hear that whatever I'm doing, the track rhythm carries on underneath. Turn that off, and it doesn't do that at all. So the other thing you've got here is a reverse mode, which is like sensor. It's like reverse plus flux. If you press reverse and then you press flux, it will actually go backwards, as opposed to having that flux thing going on as well. So now when I take my hand off the reverse button, it will continue from where I've come back to, like that. So you have the full gamut of reverse, forward and flux functions going on transport up here. Let's move down to the pads and the tempo fader and the transport controls and look at the rest of the deck now. So down here is our play, pause and cue. They are now vertical and they've got a nice click to them. Pretty much standard now to have these down here as opposed to on little rubber buttons built into some section here. So it's good to see that in 2018 Native Instruments has chosen to go down that route along with everyone else. So you've got your play, pause and your cue button for a temporary cue point there. So we also have the tempo fader. It's a nice long tempo fader which has got a lot of granularity to it. It's a very fine adjustment. Now you can hear that the key lock is on here. Just take a listen to how good that key lock is in Traktor Pro 3. A lot better. They've got elastic key shifting software in Traktor Pro 3, which is an improvement massively over Traktor Pro 2. However, we're talking here about the hardware, not the software. We have a separate hardware review. So the tempo controls, in other words, are really nice. Now the little light in the middle comes on depending on which deck you got selected, which is nice. So we also have a master key function here. And the idea of this is it turns on and off the key locking. So if you want to do this, this is a button that's going to set that on or off for you. If you want the pitch to be locked or not, the master button will do that. The sync button will sync to the other deck, and the type of sync that you have is determined by the software, whether it's a beat sync or a tempo sync. And if you hold down the shift button and press this, it will lock the tempo entirely. So there's now no way of that moving. So if you're using just sync in your mixing, you never use the tempo control, it saves you accidentally tapping the tempo control while you're in the middle of DJ. Now some of the more advanced features on the decks include the effects at the top here and the pads at the bottom here. We also haven't talked about the library yet, but before we do that, I want to continue covering the basic functions of the unit by moving on to the mixer in the middle here. So let's get a track playing down here. We have a Carbon Protect crossfader. I've no idea what that means, but it feels quite nice. It looks like it's replaceable too. The up faders are not too stiff, but they also feel quality. They are C, D, which is decks 3 and 4 if you like, the secondary decks, and A and B next to each other in the middle. Again, it's a pretty standard way of laying this stuff out. The cue buttons give you headphone cueing into the headphones, and the headphone cue mix is controlled here. To the left we'll put what you press here into the headphones. To the right we'll put what the audience is hearing, and in the middle we'll give you a mix of both. This is the volume control for your headphones. Then moving up the mixer, these are for the mixer effects, which I'm going to show you in a minute. They're awesome. They're controlled by these knobs here. But the basics we have are low, mid and high for each channel. A vastly improved VU meter per channel here, and the gain control at the top shows you whether you're peaking into the red. The top LED is red. There's the kind of middle zone before you go too loud of yellow, and then the blue zone, which is completely safe, maybe a bit too quiet down there. So you're aiming to always be just halfway into the yellow but never into the red by adjusting the gain for each channel before you do any of this stuff extra. So 4 channels are set out like that. These are the mixer effects, which I said I would give you a little bit of a demo on now. So if you press filter, then you have a basic filter per channel like this. You could turn that on and off there. If you press one of these buttons, then you're going to switch on one of the 4 selected mixer effects. And the beautiful thing about these is we've done a separate video that shows you these that we've linked to below. But the beautiful thing about these is that you can select up to 8 in the software, pick the 4 you like. There's a noise effect, which is new to Traktor Pro 3. And you'll see as well that the color coding on here shows on here, which is quite nice, but you might wonder why that's important. Well, the reason that that's important is that you can have a different effect on each channel, which is really awesome. So if I wanted to put this effect here, number 1, on this channel only, I hold down that and press that, and you see this is now effect number 1, but the rest of the decks, this one here, is still a filter. I could change this one to this, for instance, like that. I've got my filter remaining there, my noise remaining there, which is a really, really nice thing. It means you can have different effects going on all 4 channels there independently of each other. We really like that. And the mixer effects are one of the big things about this controller that we think are going to make people want it. They're really cool, they're intuitive, easy to use, and an awful lot of fun. Okay, let's move to the top section here because I want to show you another big improvement on the mixer from previous Traktor Kontrol S4 incarnations, which is the way that you can switch things in and out from external sources. It's why we've got record decks and a CDJ set up here to show you how this works and how easy it is in this new hardware. So in order for me to show you how nicely these controls work now, it's worth understanding the changes that have been made around the back here, at least as far as inputs go. So we now have 4 inputs, and I've plugged in a CDJ here and a record deck here to demonstrate this. There's an earth pole there. You can see I've got my record deck nicely earthed. So there are actually 4 inputs which could be switched on. So you can have 2 decks, 2 CDJs, all kinds of stuff plugged into the back of here. The mixer works when you've got Traktor switched on. It doesn't work as standalone with these things, which has got pluses and minuses, but that's the way it is. So here's our new input section, and you can see we've got phono and line here, phono and line here, and just line here and here. And while we're around the back, let's just have another look at what else we've got here. We've got the outputs here improved again. We've got XLRs now, as well as RCA, and we've also got our TRS boost output here. And on this side, there is a hub input, so you've got an extra USB there, and this is where the computer plugs in. Here's our mains. There's a second microphone there. It's worth me pointing that out now because you're going to see how that works in a second, and the other one is round the front. Okay, so these knobs, buttons and controls here are the key thing. Let's start playing our CD and our record, and I'll show you how we would route these into what we're doing. So my CD is plugged into channel C, and by pressing external we can hear it, and it's going to work like as if it were an internal deck, including through all the effects and so on, which is really nice. The microphone's also on here. If I want to press mic, I hold down shift and press that button again. Now it's on microphone. It'd be good to see the microphone on an external channel from the 4 main channels. That's always been the case in Traktor. It ties up one of your channels with a microphone, which is a downside of this. But nonetheless, that's where the mic is. So the other mic is on this one here. And the 2 middle ones are phono. These are where your record decks get plugged in. So we've got a record playing on the other deck, and I'm going to put this one through here. This is where it's plugged in, and it's coming into this channel here. So by pressing the same button here, there's my record deck coming into this one. And that means that, again, it's coming through a Traktor channel. I've got my Traktor effects and so on this. And by pressing the shift button and pressing it again, I can select line. It detects that it's not a line input and it goes off, which is nice. So that is how the record decks come through the unit. Let's talk a little more about that. The fact that Traktor uses 4 channels for everything, microphones, line inputs and all that stuff, is a good and a bad thing. As I said, it's good because you've got the Traktor effects, you've got the Traktor mixer effects in there, and the ones we're going to look at in a minute, the old effects that have always been there, and you can use them on all these external inputs as well. So quite often the microphone or the auxiliary inputs will just kind of bypass all that, and they're just kind of there if you need them. So it gives you more creativity, but at the expense of tying your channels up. So you just have to think about what you're going to be using your channels for with the way Traktor does it. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not a standalone mixer for that reason. You unplug the computer, and even though there's power going into this and your stuff's plugged in, you won't hear it coming out of the speakers. It has to route through Traktor. These 2 areas here are where you browse through your music, and it's been really improved in the Traktor hardware we're looking at here by splitting away from having just 1 knob and 1 set of controls to basically a complete set of controls per deck, and I prefer it that way. So let's have a look at how that works. The view button puts your library on the screen, which is just as well because there is an awful lot of stuff going on in Traktor, and you really do want to be able to get the library on the screen on its own when you need to. So there you can easily switch between the 2, and you can browse through your music that way. Now pressing this button here will add tracks to your prepare list. Prepare list is a special list in the favorites at the top. By holding down the star button and turning the knob, we can go through those favorites. So I'll go to the preparation list, and you'll see that the tracks I just added have been put into that list there now. I can take them out again by pressing this button again. So this is for preparing tracks that you want to play in your set, kind of like pulling them halfway out of a record crate for all you old vinyl DJs. So this is a really nice function as well. By hitting a track, by holding this down and then moving the prepare knob, In my headphones, you can't hear it, but this is playing me that track in my headphones, and it's independent from what's going on out there on the audience. So in other words, you can very quickly listen through a track beginning to end by holding that down and browsing this, and it's automatically in your headphones, which saves you having to load it just to see how it sounds before deciding whether to mix with it or not. Really nice set of additions here, and you can alter the behavior of browsing through either an individual folder or a set of folders or your favorites in the preferences. So by holding this here at the moment, it's looking through my favorites at the top. I can set that in the preferences so that holding that button down and turning the knob will instead go through the tree on the left hand side and let me browse that way. So it's up to you how you want to do that. Otherwise, it's going to browse through the folder that you selected. And then pressing again gets you back to the main program. Let's look at some more effects, and for those of you not familiar with the way the Traktor, indeed most controller effects work, this area at the top is an effects engine, and this area here is another effects engine, and together these can be switched to go on any channel. So whatever you do here, you can say I want that on channel, this channel or that channel or whatever. So let me show you how that works. The first thing we do is assign the effect unit we want. We're using this one here to the channel we want. Let's go on the playing channel here by pressing this button here, and then over here we get control over what's going on. So there's 3 effects lined up here. I've actually got the delay, phaser and gator. So I can turn the delay on here. I've got a wet dry for that. I can turn on the phaser, and there's the phaser intensity, and there's my gator, and I can have any combination of those, and this is the overall intensity or wet dry. And this is again saying which channel it goes on. Turn that off and we're clean. So we can put this across multiple channels, and the other effects unit is the same. So that's very standard, that's always been on Traktor. I love those jog wheels. The other thing you can do with the effects, I just showed you having 3 effects going at once. You can set it so that all the controls get really granular with a single effect, and that's always been the case in this software. And in most DJ software, actually, you get that switching from one to a set. So you can daisy chain them together. To an extent, replaced by the mixer effects that kind of do all that stuff for you and just give you something awesome you can play with, but it's there if you want it. Right, let's move on to looking at the pads. Now, one thing I like about the pads is that they've stripped back some of the, what I think are gimmicky features that have crept into pads on DJ controllers, and I'm thinking of things like slicer and pad effects and so on. I just don't think they're that useful. Native Instruments has stripped this back to the stuff that DJs really use. Hot cues, samples, and well, arguably stems is something that hasn't massively taken off, but if you're going to be chopping up your tracks and doing clever stuff with them, the stems feature is as good as any. So we've also got a record function and a mute function here, which work with the sampler sequencer. I'm not going to go into that here because it is pretty involved. It uses the remix decks as sample decks and lets you sequence what you turn on and off into a loop that you can then play alongside anything else. As I say, it's a bit complicated for this review. We might do a separate video about how the sequencer sampler works if enough people ask. But the important things to know here are that you've got 8 hot cues. So if I want to put a hot cue in my track here, the light comes on to tell me it's a hot cue, and now I can get back to it at any point, and that's going to let me do that even if I take the track off the deck. So I can do that all the way through the track. There's another one. Those 2 are now set. If I want to put a loop on the track, and I'll talk to you about the loop encoders up here in a second, but if I did have a loop on a track going around, then I can set a loop, and you see it's a different color here. This one's green. So this is now a loop. So when I jump back to that, it's back to a normal hot cue, that's back to a loop. It's actually going to go into the loop and keep looping until I turn the loop off. So that's a clever way of being able to save both loops and single hot cues. And again, that will be saved when you turn the deck off, take the track off the deck and put another track on and come back to it later on. So the stems is worth looking into for certain. You have to load a stems file for this to work. Let's press the stems button here. So you can see that I have 4 different coloured lights representing the 4 different coloured waveforms in that waveform on the screen. It looks very different to a normal waveform, right? That's because there are 4 parts of this track that I can play with. Now, it's important to point out that you have to have special stems files to do this. You can't do it with a normal track, and they're pretty hard to come by, to be fair, but the ones that you can find can be a lot of fun. So I can turn on and off the various parts of the track here. For instance, I can turn off that bass line, I can turn off the female vocal, turn off that synth, and the drum, which hasn't kicked in yet because of course we're on a build before a drop, but here comes the drum. There it is. Turn it off. More than that, as well as just turning things on and off, you can alter their volume and apply filters, and you do that by holding shift and pressing this button here. So it says volume here. So now I can alter the volume at the top here of the kick drum. And I can do that for all of them, and it's the same for filter using this knob here. So you can be filtering and applying volume changes to all 4 stems on this part of the controller. Really nice, quite easy to use, a lot of fun. And if you use a piece of software called X-Trax stems, you can make your own. So there's a little tip for you there. Okay, just a couple more things I want to show you about the screens. Just pop another track on there. Let me show you how you can change the key of the track and the other things that the screens show you, because the screens are nice. They're not touch screen or anything, but they are quite nice. They save you looking at your laptop too much. Let's have a little look at them. So we've got the name of the track at the top. I'd like to have seen that scrolling, or at least an option to have it scrolling so you can read everything, but hey, small thing. We've got the BPM here. You can see that changing as I alter the pitch. The countdown of the current time left on the track. And this is the current loop length. I'll come back to looping in a second. And down here we have a waveform of the track. You can see where the cues are set, and you can also see other information here, including current loop position. So let's go on to that looping. Here I can alter the looping among the various lengths, turn it on and off. That's now looping 2 beats. And I can turn it off like that. This control here takes the current loop and lets you move it through the track. You can see where you are on the track here moving, and the loop moving on the screen as well. And the beauty about this is that techno DJs love this because they can just find loops very quickly that they can then mess around with and mix with. But also if you set a loop somewhere that you can then move away from, you can turn it on again. When it hits that loop, it's just going to go round and round and round until we turn it off. So you can set loops in advance, ahead in a track at a part that you definitely know you're going to want to loop, and then the loop move will loop it automatically when it reaches it. So the screens are good. Some people think they should be a bit bigger, they should be showing a bit more information. I actually think they're not that necessary, quite honestly. I find myself looking at the screen when I need to know stuff anyway. But they're nice to have, they look good, they work well. So let's have a little look at what's on the front of the unit. The knobs that were sticking out that got kind of knocked and could get damaged on the old Traktor Kontrol S2 have gone. It's now pretty flat around the front, but let's see what is down there. So we've got from right to left, we've got the headphones socket here, 1/4 and 1/8 inch. You can have them both playing at once. This is mic for channel D. We looked at that earlier. You can plug in an XLR or a TRS microphone there. These are the crossfader signs. It just says that you want deck D, for instance, to be on when the crossfader is on the right or on the left, or bypassing the crossfader altogether. You can set that for all 4 of your channels. And this is a crossfader assign. This makes the curve work either very smoothly when it's set to the left like that. So in the middle, the overall volume stays about the same, but the channels are all dipped quite substantially. In the middle, the channels are dipped a little bit in the middle, and here, as soon as you move the crossfader a little bit, whatever's set to this channel is going to come through really, really loud, and vice versa. As soon as you go like this, the other one will come through loud. Very useful for scratch DJs who use it for cutting in and out. So the crossfader setting is a preference that you will find one that suits your style of DJing. Okay, so I think we've covered just about everything there. It's a very important controller, and there's an awful lot to it, as I'm sure you've realized over the last 20 minutes or so. This is the ultimate hobbyist DJ controller. It's not trying to be pro gear, and it's not trying to replace a full scratch setup, although of course, as you've seen, you can plug all this stuff into it. Instead, it's carrying on the tradition that Native Instruments has set with all its controllers of giving real serious hobbyists something to get their teeth into, and as you've seen, there is an awful lot here to get your teeth into. Really, the first thing to say about this is that they've refined just about every aspect of this over the Traktor Kontrol Mark II, S4 Mark II. It's changed in every way, and the more you scratch under the skin, the more you see that, and that means that it's going to be a lot of fun for all you S4 Mark II users looking to upgrade. Now, if you're thinking of switching to Traktor, it's a great bit of hardware. Currently, in October 2018, it's held back by the software that really hasn't kept up with the competition. Now, there are big big rumours and rumblings that all that's being fixed by Native Instruments over the coming months. But look, you're going to have to trust them to deliver on that if you're going to invest in this, because the software is holding it back at the moment with things like beat gridding and library and so on. Although the Traktor Pro 3 software has taken a few strides in the right direction. Now, the things we liked the most about this, we love the motorised jog wheels. They're really, really good, a lot of fun. We loved the mixer effects. They are really well done. It's great that you can put independent effects on each of the channels and they sound awesome. And we like the screens. We thought that they did the job just right. They're just enough down there to stop you looking at your laptop all the time, but of course they're not trying to replace the laptop. Things we don't like about it, well, it might have been nice to see dual sound cards on it. A lot of higher end controllers have got that nowadays, which makes it easy to switch over from DJ to DJ. And also it would have been nice to see more than 4 inputs. So at the moment your 4 channels, as we said, have got to cover everything. Microphones, other equipment that you've plugged in. It would have been nice to see extra inputs there so you don't have to sacrifice those if you do want to plug more stuff in than just what you're using in the software. But hey, overall this is a really nice controller and I'm sure it's going to win a lot of new fans over to Traktor, which is really the best you can say. So again, please share, please do click subscribe and also click the bell if you'd like to get more stuff like this from Digital DJ Tips. It's been a pleasure bringing this to you. Let us know what you think underneath, and meanwhile, get good, get out there and make the moments. And I'll see you again soon.